Welcome to another episode of the All Tens Podcast. I'm your co-host, Josh West. With me, as always, Clay Harris. And today, Clay, we're digging further in specifically on the relationship between the visionary and the integrator. And as with all things in EOS, we seek to simplify those things. And today we want to cover 5 simple rules that we call the rules of the game between the visionary and the integrator. Clay, what you got for us?
Well, actually, I'm going to send it back to you, Josh. I got a question for you before we kind of dive into that.
Okay.
Give our listeners just kind of like a 20-second recap of the visionary and integrator, kind of like what those roles are.
So the visionary oftentimes is the founder, but not necessarily. This is the person who likes to stay 30,000 feet above the business, has lots of ideas, has lots of big ideas, likes to maintain very large relationships, often with big customers, big vendors, the biggest accounts, those sorts of things. This person does not like to get bogged down into the details of the day-to-day. And that's where the integrator comes in, because this person is the glue that holds everything together, harmonizing all the major functions of the business, running the day-to-day operations. And these people kind of couldn't be more different, but they're like yin and yang. You need both of them. And, you know, it is, I like to think of it as the visionary kind of lives in the future. And it's the responsibility of the integrator to keep us in the present and accomplish the goals of the day.
Yeah. So I wanted you to do that because because maybe our listeners, one, just needed the refresh, but 2, like, why do these people need a special set of rules? Right. And I think that's an important thing to just kind of put your arm around, especially if you kind of do it as simply as what you just said, like visionary kind of living out into the future, integrator, making sure that everything's working well today. There will be not the potential for, there will be like these times where we need real clarity around who's doing what. And it's more than just the accountability chart, because those things will come into conflict. And so that's why we need rules. So I just wanted to put a little context out there for the listeners. Those visionaries and integrators are gonna butt heads. It's not about whether or not they will. It's when, not if, right? And
Correct.
so we have these 5 rules to kind of help prevent the damage from being really large when that conflict comes up, right? And so the first rule, so I'm just going to dive into it. 5 rules. Remember, we've been doing a lot of listicle episodes lately. I feel like we're like BuzzFeed. But anyway, the first rule is stay on the same page. So number 1 rule, you have to be on the same page. Like, if you can visualize the accountability chart, if you remember when we do this exercise on focus day, we name the primary functions of the business, right? And all those kind of like peers on the leadership team, and they all report to the integrator, right? And the visionary on the accountability chart sits above the integrator. And so there's like there's one line from visionary to integrator. And so this is like this duo that has to be in sync, because if that leadership team kind of detects like there's something that the integrator thinks that the visionary doesn't agree with, or there's a gap between them, it has this really impactful uncertainty effect on the leadership team, where they don't know who to listen to, right? Like they know they work for the integrator, but if the visionary is the founder and they're saying something different, that's just confusing. And if it's confusing for the leadership team, imagine how confusing it is for the rest of the organization. The leadership team is omnipotent. They know everything. But if that's not clear there, imagine how unclear it is everywhere else. And Josh, what's a way that we have a tool to keep the visionaries and integrators on the same page? You want to walk us through it?
We do. And it's called the same page meeting. And I think of that as also part of the meeting pulse. And I'll even be a little bit impure here and say, just practically, the way that I think about it is that weekly leadership level 10 meeting when you think about that agenda and then you think about the roles of the integrator on the accountability chart, that's kind of their meeting. You know, they're checking in to make sure that we're on track, right? So when we talk about them managing the rest of the leadership team, leading them, and also delivering the business plan, that's where we're checking in on it weekly. If the scorecard measurable's off, that's the time to dive into it and get it right. Same thing with those rocks. On the other hand, when we've got that same page meeting between just the visionary and the integrator and ownership on a monthly basis, we don't have the rest of the team there. That agenda is not the same. We're not necessarily diving into the scorecard and the rocks and those sorts of things. And I feel as though that's where the visionary can really bloom, bring out all of those ideas, but not necessarily get the rest of the team distracted from them. So, like I say, a bit impure, but in all practicality, when I think about it, that's the opportunity for the visionary to be like, all right, here's all the ideas I have. And then they can have that conversation on, okay, what do we have the time to do? What do we have the budget to do? And be able to take that back to the team. And so that meeting is also very important. One that doesn't get talked about a lot.
I often kind of call the integrator like the shock absorber for the visionary, right? Like both ways, right? Like in one way, kind of keeping like the crazy ass ideas that a visionary like wakes up and is pissed off about this or has a new idea about that, or like, and instead of like just raining chaos on the organization by walking around the office and yelling at people or saying, I thought we should try this kind of bullshit. Excuse my language. It's December 29th. I'm just feeling it this morning. When we're recording this. Anyway, instead of that, the visionary putting chaos onto the organization, they do it in the same page meeting, right? Where it's just, we're absorbing all that, filtering it. Maybe there's issues that go on the leadership team, L10. Maybe there's things that, let's think about that a little bit more. But you have the integrators kind of managing the visionary's energy. And the other way, this might be where things that are happening within the organization come up to the visionary so that they can react outside of earshot, or, they can just hear all the things that are happening, not for the first time, because my experience is that the visionary is the one who's like kind of a little bit reactive, maybe a little bit more kind of amp upable, if that makes sense. And so like, if I'm the integrator, I also want to be sharing surprises one-on-one, not in front of a large crowd, just because, man, sometimes I need to make sure that, the saddle's on tight before we run into the leadership team. You know what I'm saying? Does that
Absolutely.
make sense?
I mean,
yeah.
I feel like sitting in that integrator seat is a tough one because, yeah, you've got to guard the energy of the rest of the team from in the visionary just having everybody working on 17 projects, but also some of those little knick-knack things, in the day-to-day don't need to make their way necessarily to the visionary's brain. It's like, just handle it, right?
Right.
I'm trying to think about where this thing's going in the next 6 months, year, 3 years, right? I can't deal with the little knick-knack things day to day. So yeah, there's that.
Yeah. So that's rule one. You got to be on the same page. What's rule number 2, Josh?
No end runs. And what that means in plain terms is, if you don't get the answer that you like from one person, you can't just run to the next one. And then also the other way that works is also when the leadership team has made a decision, you've got to be a united front. And so when you exit that meeting, if you didn't necessarily get your way, you disagree with what happened, you can't let that toxicity come back out into the team. And so, no end runs is sort of like children, right? If they ask mom for something and you don't get the right answer, you go to dad. And we've got a question that we like to ask people in order to stop end runs. Clay, share that question with our listeners.
I don't know what question you're talking about, because you probably know clearly. What question generally? So
let's say I'm the integrator and leadership team member, someone comes to me and they don't agree with the strategy that we're following, or trying to do something that the visionary has come up with, and let's say they're just kind of criticizing them and they say, I really don't agree with, Sarah's strategy on this. And so we'll
Oh, right,
listen
right,
and
right.
then we'll say,
Are you going to tell them or am I? Is that the question
exactly.
you were hoping for? Okay. Whew.
Yeah.
Phew. Man, that was a lot of pressure. We didn't talk about that beforehand. But I'm
No.
glad I got it right. That's the thing, right? It's like, and it's interesting. I'm actually really interested by your perspective on that. From the team member's point of view, because often when I'm talking about it from the visionary point of view. I
Mm.
wonder, this is just like our kind of like lived experience coming to life, right? Where that's just really
Okay.
funny. Where I'm like, hey, visionary, can you please not go talk to this person 4 levels down and have them do that personal project for you, or like kind of take a real distinct interest in like the programming part of the work that we're doing because that's what you did in college, because you're just, you know what I'm saying? Like no end runs, but goes both ways. Right. And the thing and maybe this is again, just my kind of perspective, having sat in the visionary seat for a long time, is that I could see myself doing it. Right. I could see myself being like, shit, it's really hard to get stuff done. Kind of I'm not really hard. I'm too impatient for things to happen the right way. And I'm just going to go talk to this person. And it often just created more problems because I wasn't thoughtful about all the ripple effects. But there's an interesting kind of other part to this of no end runs, is that this gets more complicated when the visionary, as is often the case with our clients, is sitting in multiple seats. And so it just becomes really something to think about, a frame within which you can put some of the frustrations that are coming out in the organization when you think about how people perceive you. I often call this like kind of executive or like CEO, like amplification. Like you might be talking from your sales seat that you're sitting in, but because you're the CEO, everything that you say like is like 40 times bigger than if you were just the chief revenue officer. You know what I'm saying? Like, and so this is a really powerful idea and also really hard. It's really hard to kind of do with fidelity.
Very difficult. I have a client and, they're in the middle of transitioning in the succession plan to the next generation. And so, one of the owners is a founding member and, he doesn't sit in the visionary or the integrator seat anymore. And yet, if they speak up during a meeting, that is the word, right? Because everybody has been living that for over 2 decades now. So
Yeah.
that's a tough one to break. And yeah, Clay, I think we could have an entire episode about the negative downstream effects and impact of breaking this rule from different directions. You can really cut people's legs out from under them. You can create a lot of dependence. You can sow a lot of discord and dysfunction this way. Big time problems. And yeah, you're right. A difficult one to follow all the time. But that question, are you going to tell them or am I going to tell them? Because one of us needs to tell them, usually stops end runs from happening. But you've got to employ that question.
Yeah, cool. That was rule number 2. So rule number 1, same page. Rule number 2, no end runs. Rule number 3, integrator is the tiebreaker. Pretty self-explanatory on this one. I don't know that there's too much. It can be a little bit hard, right? Especially like kind of in the example you just talked about where the guy's been in the seat for 20 years, whatever, no longer even on the accountability chart sitting, I'd imagine, up in the owner's box. But this is what we do in the session rooms all the time where we'll say, like, you might have the founder sitting right next to you, sitting in the visionary seat, and they've got this integrator who's been in the seat for 9 months, and you're like, all right, this is a difficult decision. And instead of looking at the founder, you look at the integrator and they make the decision. Everybody's like, gets a little tense. You can feel the muscles tense up, but that's the job. That's actually the job. And that's the muscle that we're building, right? Is getting that integrator to actually take the reins and be in charge, which is a fun kind of journey to go on.
By far my favorite rule.
Yeah.
By far. Because just as we just talked about in the prior rule, and as you just outlined, a lot of times you've got one of those owners, the visionary, who's sitting there, but yet when we talk about the accountability chart and the roles of the integrator, we can't hold them accountable to those roles and then not allow them to do the job. And so that rule is part of that, because those two things are connected. We said these were the roles of the integrator, and then we can't just get to a tough decision and then all of a sudden say, oh, well, we'll leave it to someone else. And also, this is part of allowing us to move forward, because a lot of times people want to rule by that consensus. They want that unanimous decision. Well, we've all got to buy in and we've all got to agree. And absolutely not. We do not. And we're going to hear all relevant voices and get all the information out there. But then if we can't come to a unanimous decision, integrator, for the greater good of the organization,
That's right.
make a decision.
I think this is like one of the things that when it happens, not when it happens, when you get good at it, it is one of those things that kind of permeates throughout the organization that helps you start going really fast, which is that like, oh, someone just needs to decide. And generally it's the person who's in charge of this team. And so at the leadership team level, it's the integrator. At the operations level, it's whoever's leading that team on the accountability chart, the person who has LMA responsibility over the operations team. When they get good at realizing that, oh shit, I'm cursing a lot. Whatever. Sorry, Mom. I know my mom is a big listener. When they get really good at deciding and they embrace the idea that, like, you know what the good news is about having a recurring L10 is that we're going to know quickly if this wasn't the right decision. We're not going to like hurt anybody. Nobody's going to die, hopefully, because of this decision. Like, we just have to make a decision. The only way we move forward is to decide something today. And guess what? We're going to get together next week or the week after that and know whether or not it worked. And then we'll decide something different. We'll make a better decision having made the first one. That thing of just making just decide. I love the, like, we don't all have to like kind of say an opinion. This is like why meetings are shitty. Everyone says their opinion and then no one decides to do anything, but everyone's like, man, we talked a lot. Anyway, that's a different subject, but integrator is the tiebreaker. Hard at the leadership team level, but powerful once you get good at it. Okay, sorry, I ranted.
I had a team that had a breakthrough where a lot of times they might kick the can down the road. Like they didn't come to a consensus, that sort of thing. And one person in the organization started employing the phrase, a bad plan is better than no plan. Like,
damn,
we got to have one. And I'm like, if that's what works for you, great. I'm glad that we found a phrase for it. And so now when we get stuck, then that phrase comes out and we can at least decide, move on and iterate. And also, not to take us on too much of a tangent, but for our listeners out there, also, if it's very easy to unwind the decision, very easy to undo it, and we're not going to completely derail things, fine, decide quickly and then find out. And then if it's easy to just reset, then great. No reason to sit here and spend weeks on something that we can learn from and unwind in a day.
Right. Love it. So 3 rules so far. We got to pick up the pace. Same page. No end runs. Integrator is the tiebreaker. Rule number 4, Josh, what is it?
You are an employee when working in the business. Boy, you started to allude to this one earlier, because let's say we got an owner and they're the visionary. And then they also sit in the sales seat. And so then when they're sitting in the sales seat, then technically they report to the integrator about that. And so now, like, we've got people wearing different hats, but then reporting to each other depending on what function they're serving that day. And so, you'd made a comment earlier, Clay, of, that person sitting there has an idea, but it carries more weight just because of who they are otherwise. And that's something to where that's just, I find that takes good facilitation, either from ourselves as implementers in the session, or you've got to have strong facilitation if that's occurring in level 10, where if that starts to seem to be the case, but someone's got to say, well, wait, for the purposes of this conversation, who are we? And making sure that someone just, for lack of a better way of articulating it, just doesn't simply get to throw their weight around.
Yeah. I think most of the time, I think there's two things I want to just have our listeners hone in on. One is, and I have a client who is exactly in this scenario where like it's a married couple who own and operate the business. And when we built the accountability chart, there wasn't a seat for the wife, like kind of in the day-to-day function of the business. There was like some transitioning that needed to happen to get her out, but ultimately her place on the accountability chart is in the owner's box. It's like, which doesn't happen all the time. Not necessarily. I won't even put a percentage on it, but when there's someone who's an owner in the company, who isn't active in the day-to-day of the company, you have to put them in the owner's box and give them some accountabilities too. Like, what are the things that they're in charge of? Very typically it's hire and fire, the visionary and integrator. Maybe, like very think board kind of like work, right? Get monthly, quarterly, annual. What is it? Financial reporting, on time, accurate and on time. Distribute, quarterly distribute, whatever it is. What are the things that happen when you're in the owner's box? If that person is also in the business, you put them in their seat in the accountability chart. And the distinction is you can't really be fired as an owner, but you can be fired from any seat on the accountability chart. And when you're working the accountability chart, you have those 5 roles that you have to be accomplishing in your seat, measured on a scorecard, rocks, whatever they are. And you have to be as good, if not better, than your replacement would be in that seat, because you've got this added pressure of also being an owner. And so when you're in the business, be in the business. You can't pull out the owner's card when you're sitting in your marketing seat. That's not fair. It's not fair to your Anyway, I think.
And this has happened with me in session with clients. And so I've started to put roles inside of the owner's box as well.
Yeah, agreed.
So that it's like, so that then it's clear, or at least helpful. It's not just, oh, you're in the owner's box, right? Because then if we're working through a particular issue or we're on a topic, then we can say, well, this deals with this particular role in this seat. So that defines the hat, and that also helps, as you were talking about, the owner's box, Clay. I think a lot of times what ends up there is any kind of M&A activities, extremely large capital expenditures over a certain amount that needs to get ownership approval, like real big boy, big girl ownership type stuff. Right. And so then it's like, well, if we're not talking about one of those things, then the owner's card can't come out.
Right.
And we're talking strictly and being faithful to the accountability chart and the seats that we're currently talking about.
Agreed.
The 5th rule, Clay.
5th rule, bringing it home here. The 5th rule is maintain mutual respect. And I think this is kind of implied in all of the stuff we've been talking about here, but between that visionary and integrator, you got to have a high level of trust. If you're sitting in a visionary or integrator seat and you don't like or respect your counterpart, man, that's just no fun. Like go somewhere else. Go do something different. Mm-hmm. That relationship has to be tight. It has to be mutually respectful. You have to feel like you've got each other's back all the time, which means this is not. To me, I don't know, Josh. To me, this is like the same thing as being on the same page. Like these are the two that are just kind of like just about that relationship has to be really rock solid.
You hit the key word there, Clay. I believe it's trust. And from there, everything else really kind of grows and develops. But that's really at the core there, because as a visionary, you've got to trust that they've got that day to day, right? Don't go meddling around. And as the integrator, while you're sitting there getting bogged down into the weeds of the day to day, you got to trust that somebody else is looking out for the future, whether it's how technology is affecting your business and changing it. If you've got to go out and continue to merge with or acquire other businesses to continue to scale to achieve your goals, all those sorts of things. And so absolutely, that is a special relationship within the business and maintaining mutual respect is critical. Before passing it back to you to wind it up, I'll share that my nugget is, outside of those 5 rules, we alluded to it, have the same page meeting. Like I say, that's one I believe it kind of gets overlooked. And we've got the level 10s. We're meeting on those quarterly pulsing sessions, etc. But once a month, get out of the office, get to a neutral location, visionary, integrator, and all ownership getting on the same page. Very critical. What do you got, Clay? Take them home.
Yeah, I think the only nugget I have is, like, there's a whole book in the EOS library about this called Rocket Fuel, about that visionary and integrator relationship. So if this is something that is interesting to you, oh, look at that. Josh has it right in front of him. Cool. If that's interesting to you, pick up a copy of that book. Also, if there's something you want us to dive deeper into, let us know in the comments. Also, if you're watching this on video, we got some All-Tins merch. Like, we don't have a store or anything like that, but if you wanted, like, listen, this is a middle-aged white dude podcast, so quarter zips are definitely part of the game. Let me know. We might be able to tell you where we got them and even supply you with the digital artwork. Maybe we'll help you order it. I don't know. Whatever. Merch. Maybe sometimes. We got dozens of listeners now, so you never know. You never know. Anyway, all right. My name's Clay. His name's Josh. We're EOS Implementers, and we'd love to hear from you about what you liked or didn't like about the podcast, whether or not you have questions you want us to dive into. Maybe you want to be a guest, whatever. Anywhere you listen to the podcast, like, comment, rate. We're so glad you're here, and I think that by the time you listen to this, it's going to be almost spring, probably. So, like, hopefully we're turning the corner from cold weather into warmer weather, and we'll hit you next week again with a new one. Till then, bye, everybody. Bye, Joshie.
Bye, Clay.